No fancy introduction needed tonight, just a bloody good win to talk about. This is your e-Spurs podcast.
Come on, you Spurs! 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 Tottenham, Tottenham!
Hi guys, welcome to the e-Spurs podcast. Don't forget, we want you guys out there to get in touch and stay in touch with the show and get involved with us by subscribing on iTunes or Acast. By doing so, you'll get every new episode direct as it's released. We're also available on Twitter and Instagram at @e_Spurs, on your Facebook pages at e-Spurs page, all one word. And you can follow us via YouTube, Pinterest, Tumblr, various other platforms out there, guys. So get involved, and you can find all of the links for e-Spurs platforms at www.espurs, all one word, .blogspot.co.uk. On the e-Spurs podcast tonight, unsurprisingly, we'll be talking about that win on Sunday and what it means in the context of the season. We'll take your questions for the panel and we'll be previewing our next batch of games, which see us on the road for 4 games on the trot. So, fairly difficult period coming up, but one which I'm sure will tell us a lot about the side. To begin with, though, let's introduce the team that I'll be talking Tottenham with tonight. It's Jason, John, Ricky and Ian. How you doing, lads?
Very well, mate. Just getting ready to clean Ricky's cupboard out.
I've got a feeling, Rick, we might have to put you back in that cupboard by the end of the night.
Oh, don't worry about that. I'll be going back in there.
John, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Just managed to peel myself off the ceiling in time to start recording.
And Ian?
Yeah, it was an awesome game, and so looking forward to tonight's pod. So,
oh, mate.
Really looking forward to it.
Listen, I know since the game we've all been looking forward to this one. Nothing better than waking up the morning after a win. And what a feeling that was last night, beating Man City. Not just beating them, but pretty much wiping the floor with what have been touted to be the best side in the country. Should give us plenty to talk about tonight. Got a feeling it might be an interesting podcast worth sticking around for. So let's talk Tottenham. First up, I've got to come to you, Jay. I've got a bone to put with you, mate, because since you've been in the UK, we've beaten Sunderland 1-0, Gillingham 5-0, 2 away wins, one of which was in the Champions League, and then Man City 2-0. Any chance of you moving back to the UK, mate?
Well, I should be back here, I think, right away from November through to the next April. So I don't know how many games we got after April, but hopefully we can tie up the title before I fly back to Bangkok then. Can we try and be champions by Easter or something like that?
Listen, the way things are going, it's looking good, eh? I tell you what, don't want to tempt fate, do we? But certainly looking promising. And obviously last season was a bit of an interesting one for all of us because it was the unknown, wasn't it? You know, it was going into that period of the end of the season, never been through anything like that in most of our lifetimes. And the signs are this season, it's looking healthy, eh? It's looking good. Let's talk Spurs then. Yesterday, Man City, fantastic 2-0 win. Own goal to start us off, and then Dele Alli, what a goal that was. Fantastic pass through to Dele Alli. Finished brilliantly, didn't he? So let's ask, Jay, we're with you. Let's stay with you, mate. What a game, and you was there.
Yeah, and it was a fantastic performance. But I have to say, you know, I'll be honest, and I tipped Manchester City to win the game beforehand, but there was nothing that I saw yesterday from Tottenham that surprised me. You know, I've seen today, I think the Game podcast has said, is it time to take Tottenham as serious title contenders? They didn't say winners, they said contenders. And you think, we've lost 6 games of our last 47. Our last 15 games. 15 against what you think of as our title rival clubs, if you like, the 2 Manchester clubs, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea. 15 games, we've lost just 1 of those 15. Now, OK, we've had a lot of draws in there, but we're showing we can go and compete against the big sides and get a result. And, you know, Manchester City came last year with a fantastic start to the season. OK, it wasn't under Guardiola, but we beat them 4-1 then. So, you know, I didn't see anything in Tottenham yesterday that I didn't feel that we had in us, if you know what I mean. What? It was a fantastic performance. We thoroughly deserved the win, the energy in the side. Everything was spot on that we wanted. But there was nothing, like I say, you know, we are a seriously good side. And I think all we did yesterday was show the rest of the country how good a side we were. But I don't think there was a single Spurs fan that would have been that surprised by how well we played.
Why do you think that is, Jay? Because, I mean, we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with you over in Thailand, and I remember saying to you that the media over here still don't seem to be taking Spurs seriously. Why do you think that is?
Well, for sure, having been back here for a few weeks, now the impact of, or how the media coverage of us is obviously more noticeable for me, because I do now see the back pages of the papers. I do see Sky Sports News and things like that. And it does surprise me how little people compliment us. I mean, again, yesterday, we went into the game second in the league, unbeaten. It's not like we've suddenly we've just put a run of 6 or 7 games together. We've been in a title race for most of last season. I mean, I find it crazy that before the season, people were saying, oh, well, I think, all these new managers coming in and they'll all strengthen their teams. And I remember John saying, well, we don't have to strengthen that much. Why should we go and spend money? And I think I said as well that despite all the new managers coming in, they're all starting kind of behind us, and they weren't necessarily all bringing players in that I was scared of. This Manchester City, they brought in Stones and they brought in the bloke that came on, Sane and stuff like that. But there's you look at them and think, would any of those get in our side? I'm not saying they haven't got players that would do. I think Aguero and De Bruyne are 2 fantastic players. But of the players that came into the so-called big clubs over the summer, how many did Liverpool buy that you would really want? How many did Chelsea buy that you'd think, God, he'd improve our team? Pogba, obviously, and Ibrahimovic is slightly different, but I didn't feel that any of those clubs were suddenly going to strengthen their side, that they pick up another 15, 20 points in the season. And then in places like David Luiz, I thought, you'd probably lose 20 points with someone like that.
Yeah.
So, I am surprised that the coverage of us, it just isn't as high. But perhaps Pochettino doesn't go out of his way to catch the cameras. He doesn't run up and down the touchline like somebody who's drunk too many tins of Red Bull or something. And he certainly doesn't celebrate when we draw, at home to West Brom or 4-4 at Norwich.
Yeah.
So, perhaps that's what you have to do to be taken as a serious title contender.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Jay. It does seem you have to be one of these managers that are trending at the moment, the Klopps or the Guardiolas or the Mourinhos, those who are egomaniacs in a lot of ways, when you think of those managers. Whereas Pochettino's not, as you say, he's very quietly spoken. He goes about his business without fuss, doesn't he? Doesn't cause a fuss at press conferences. After yesterday, what can you say? Rick, we're going to let you out of the cupboard, mate. Welcome back to the podcast. I know you've been away for a week or so. Welcome back. Now, Jason's just mentioned there Sergio Aguero. I can't personally remember Aguero being as quiet in a game as he was yesterday. I can't remember one meaningful shot he had on goal, and a lot of that obviously is down to what has been this season a fantastic defence. Conceded just 3 goals in the league in 7 games and not 1 goal from open play. Pretty much unheard of. Just how good is this defence?
I've got to say, I think I said on social media yesterday, I mean, this defensive line we've got, Rose, Alderweireld, Vertonghen and Walker, it's the best back 4 in my lifetime supporting Spurs. Now, obviously, I've been around for the past couple of decades, so I really haven't had much to go on, but it is such a phenomenal back line. And Lloris, I mean, people will forget yesterday, his save with 10 minutes to go. Don't understate the importance of that save from Aguero. Apart from that, really, he was firmly in the back pockets of both Vertonghen and Alderweireld. But I think yesterday was really just the magnitude of how Poch completely outcoached, outwitted and outplayed Guardiola at his own game. A lot of people seem to mention the fact that, Guardiola was this kind of master of the high press. Well, Pochettino for those first 45 minutes proved that he was the king. It was probably, I'm going to go on record and saying it's one of the best Spurs performances for me in recent memory against such a top-class side, labelled title contenders. What a statement we've made, really. And you take into account no Harry Kane, no Moussa Dembele, who last season, we struggled to win without. We've gone 6 games now without Dembele, and we've managed to go unbeaten. And even Eric Dyer. Eric Dyer is finding himself on the bench and may not even get back into the team.
Yeah.
So it's completely mad. But I think what it comes down to yesterday, the evidence it shows that City may have all the millions, but you cannot buy the soul, the passion and desire this young Spurs team have. And I think Wanyama in the middle, I think he just typifies the heartbeat to our side. I mean, he literally 11 million for him, 89 million for Pogba. Okay, you could get 8 Wanyamas for that. It is absolutely mental. And then you've got Toby Alderweireld in defence, who, again, like I say, him and Vertonghen yesterday were absolutely rock solid, phenomenal. I think Vertonghen looks like he's improved this season. Again, I mean, last season there was a little bit of kind of at times, both of them, you know, they were great last season, but they look even better as a unit this season. And I think what you're seeing now is an even more stronger Tottenham side than last season, because we've had that extra year of experience of them all together. Like John and the boys have said, he hasn't tinkered too much in terms of the changes made. And, I mean, into Sissoko, I mean, I hold my hands up. You know, you've got to eat humble pie sometimes. I wasn't the biggest advocate of him coming in. But when you take into account, I think he's an upgrade on both Bentaleb and Mason combined for me. I think yesterday he's lambasting runs going forward. He really does take the team forward. And I've got to mention, obviously, Rose and Walker. I think Rose coming back into the side, like I say, a few games out, it was like he'd never been away. Probably, again, it's so hard to keep saying it, one of his best performances in a Spurs shirt. And I think Kyle Walker sent Sterling back to Liverpool for the way he played him. He was absolutely phenomenal. But it was so hard yesterday to even pick out a man of the match, because all of the lads played so well. And you got Son, who, you know, I think a lot of us, when we saw the starting lineup, were a little bit concerned that he's playing Son out of his favourite position, which is on the wide left. But he'd done a job for the team. And yeah, I think we've got to say statement made, haven't we?
Certainly do. I mean, statement and then some, wasn't it? You know, I think everyone now they wasn't taking notice of us before. They certainly are now. And John, yesterday there was a few raised eyebrows, as Rick said before the game, at the team selection. It was a brave selection by Pochettino, wasn't it? You know, it could have gone Son up front. It was almost a top four he played up front there, and they were just fantastic.
See, for me, that decision was a no-brainer. I would have done exactly the same thing. If you're playing against a team who, you know, they try and make their goalkeeper play like a playmaker. He's not, you know, as we've seen, he's not the best of his feet, Bravo. And you know that they're not going to, similar to us, they're not going to abandon their, you know, the way they play and start lumping it upfield. So you know he's going to try and pick out the fullbacks or to give the ball to Stones or Mendy. And if you're putting them under pressure for the entire game, which we did, it's going to lead to mistakes. And how many times we win the ball back and force them into mistakes?
Yeah.
You know, along their defensive line through balls from the keeper. It was quite amazing, really. You know, let's be honest as well. To take out Janssen and play Son up there, you're not losing any kind of goal for it. Son's our top scorer.
Yeah.
So not only is he our top scorer, but you know he's going to just be a pain for the whole game and get right up them. And that's exactly what he done. They didn't have time to play. And we know that, you know, most teams will sit back against Man City and sort of invite that pressure on, hoping to hit them on the counter. But that's obviously not the way we play. And it was perfect yesterday. Everything, it's just a perfect performance, really. I think, you know, I can't really throw any more superlatives at it, really.
If you had to pick one thing, John, from yesterday that you was most pleased about, what would it be, apart from obviously the result?
I was quite pleased that Wanyama's managed to stay on the pitch. Booked after half an hour. That worried me a little bit, purely because, you know, the job he was given was just to eat anything that came near him, and he was so imperious in that midfield. As soon as he got booked, it did worry me a little bit, but it didn't stop. He didn't change the way in which he played. I think his booking was a bit harsh anyway. But I just think that what most impressed me was just this well-oiled machine which we have become. We're like the Germans now. We're ruthlessly efficient, game after game. Every single player is efficient and then some. You know, they're all skillful players. They all know what their job is. And the fact that Poch, out of that team yesterday, or our strongest 11, there's only 3 or 4 players that weren't already there when Poch came in. You're talking about Ali, Wanyama, Alderweireld, Sonny as well, from Sissoko played yesterday. But from probably what's our strongest 11, there's only 3 or 4 that weren't already there. So you think what he's done, just a little few tweaks here and there in terms of personnel, but the whole way that we play, it's just, you know, it is. I love watching it, although it's like watching my children running around. It makes you tired, you know, watching it, because they do expand some energy, and the amount of sprints, like, was it 647 sprints or something yesterday? That's a ridiculous stat. I was like a peacock walking into work this morning. It was beautiful. So I know a couple of my colleagues have put money on City to win.
I'm sure you didn't mention that one at all this morning, John. But I know what you mean. Just talking about that exhausting you. I tell you what, it got to the last 10 minutes of the game yesterday, and I don't think I've ever been so tempted to leave the house and walk around the block for 10 minutes. It was squeaky bum time, wasn't it? It's lovely to see. And Ian, I just wonder there, just while John was talking, do you think maybe in some respect we caught Man City a bit unawares with our team selection? Do you think they was maybe expecting something a bit different and that caused them a problem right from the get-go?
Yeah, I think it did. I think that you look at the start of the game, take the kick off, and within a minute, Son's having a shot on goal, and I think that set the tempo for the rest of the game. I know there were bits where we sort of like just caught our breaths a wee bit, and City came back into it. But I think that they couldn't cope with the pressing. I know they both, John and Ricky have mentioned it before, and Jace, that the pressing on the keeper I just found was inspired. It was one of those things where you think he wants, I think Pep wants Bravo to be his version of Neuer. And I'm thinking, do you know what? I'd love us to see how we get on against someone like Bayern Munich, and I tell you what, I bet old Neuer wouldn't like, to come up against us at the minute if we were set out tactically, like we were yesterday. And I genuinely don't think that Pep was ready for it, because if he'd have been ready for it, then we'd have had a different game, surely, because he'd have sent his team out with different tactics.
Yeah.
And I just think that, as I think Pochettino has said it yesterday, it was almost the perfect game.
And Jay, what does it mean, this result yesterday? Does it change anything, do you think? Does it change our goals? Does it change how we're perceived, how other teams will play against us? Does it change anything?
Well, I think it might well change how other teams see us. But like I said, I don't think it will have changed anything. I think Pochettino has probably said to them today, well done, but last season you beat them 4-1 anyway. So don't get too carried away with it. Go away with the international teams and make sure when you come back you're ready for West Brom. And then, that's a new test completely, because that will be an entirely different game. Because as well as we played yesterday, let's be honest, against Manchester City, you will be able to play and pass it and things like that, because, they'll pass it around and they'll play with a high line. So when you win the ball, you will have angles to knock the ball inside of defenders and things like that. Whereas if you, against West Brom, it'll just get hoofed all over the place. And when we do win it off their back four, their midfield will only be 2 yards in front of their back four, and the striker will only be another yard in front of them on the edge of the box, won't he? Yeah. So, it's not so easy then to start threading the little balls like Son gave to A. But, it hasn't changed anything in my mind. I think we are a seriously good side, and without a doubt we are a title contender. But the one thing that we need to do is prove that in some form of competition this year is to go and win that trophy that shows that we're not a nearly team, we're not a promising team, but we are now a delivering team. And I think yesterday's result probably has raised one or two eyebrows around the country, but... it hasn't changed anything for me. And I think the other thing to say, in fairness to City, it hasn't changed my opinion of whether they're likely to have a good season, because the one thing that Manchester City won't face, other than yesterday and maybe against Liverpool, they won't get hounded for 90 minutes like we could do. Yeah. And then when we do win the ball, they won't have that much, other teams won't have the quality. I think Swansea hounded them for about 20 minutes the week before and played pretty well for 20 minutes, but they could only do it for 20 minutes and they didn't have that quality to hurt. So whilst we might have shown other teams how to beat Manchester City, I'm still not sure there's too many other teams anywhere near of producing a performance that we produced yesterday.
The thing that impressed me the most was the pace that we moved the ball at when we got it. And it's obviously the opponents that we faced in the last few weeks, I've been concerned about the slow passing of the ball. And Ricky made a great point to me before we came on the podcast, and that was that obviously against Man City you're going to have more opportunity to move the ball at pace, because Man City aren't going to put 11 men behind the ball, and we saw that yesterday, which was just a joy to behold, the pace we moved the ball at. And it's something that I've been longing to see for so long, and I mean, it's just fantastic. And I think John hit the nail on the head earlier in terms of describing this side. They're a bit of a machine at the moment, aren't they? You just see them rolling through the season, getting result after result. And we don't want to tempt fate. Obviously, it's still very, very early in the season, but it's very, very healthy, looking good. Rick, just to finish up on the Man City, in terms of the prediction you made before the season, Have you changed your prediction after yesterday's result?
We are 8 games in. I think you have to say that yesterday was a statement that we will be in amongst, the title challenge. I think we all said beginning of the season, you look at the likes of Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea, obviously City, in fact, like starting again as such, having to get their squads together. We knew we already had our foundations in place, and it was just a matter of tweaking the certain areas in order to then us to go again and have a good season. Now, we've done that. We've done our little bit of tweaking, and yesterday's result proves that we will be up there. Whether or not we've got the squad that can compete as the season goes on, obviously it's very hard to predict that at the moment because we are only 8 games in. There's a big season ahead and a lot can happen. And, with the Champions League, with the other cups, there will be times where certain competitions will take certain priority. And that's where Pochettino will earn his money in terms of the selection he chooses. But I think yesterday was a statement. City haven't really had, apart from United aside, they haven't had a challenge up until yesterday. And the first challenge they had, really, they fell at. So with that being the case, I think we have to say, Spurs are going to be in that reckoning. And it's all going to be about really the mentality of the squad. And the test may be the week after the international break. We go away to West Brom. It's a game that really on paper we should win. West Brom have been a bit of a bogey team for Spurs over recent years. We haven't necessarily always got the result there. And we haven't always necessarily got the result under pressure. And I think this is where now that turning point changes. That City result now will put us in that spotlight. And we saw last season that unfortunately we didn't have the mental capability to cope in that spotlight. So we are now going to see Spurs being spoken about in the same breath as potentially a Manchester City or, the Man United, Chelsea, in that kind of bracket of going for the title. The question now is, can we handle it under pressure? And we'll find out West Brom away, because these are the games, if you want to win the league, if you want to be in the reckoning, you have to take 3 points. And I presume, we're going to find out.
Yeah, and just checking the odds as I did this morning, still absolutely stunned to see Liverpool still ahead of us, for the title in the odds. It just goes to show, doesn't it? Going back to Jason's point earlier about these managers, it's all about the managers this season, and just stunned, bearing in mind the results and our undefeated record this season, because we haven't got a manager who's flavour of the month, it seems, we still are under the radar slightly, and maybe long may that last, because it certainly worked last season in our favour, didn't it?
Very quickly on that Liverpool stat you've just mentioned, what amazes me is that we've finished above Liverpool 7 out of the 8 last seasons.
Yeah.
And again, continuously Liverpool are up there, and rightly so, and you can't get away from the fact Liverpool have got a bigger history than Spurs. They may have a bigger pull in terms of fan base, but it does amuse me that when you put Tottenham's squad next to Liverpool, and the fact you look at past recent history in terms of Spurs continually finishing above Liverpool, and that Liverpool seem to still have better odds than Spurs, for me it screams this whole Klopp factor.
Yeah.
So it does make me laugh on that basis, but maybe, like I say, we've spoken about, it's great for us that we are remaining under that radar, because I think that's where we play our best football.
Yeah, at times it makes my blood boil, I've got to admit, but then you look at it and you sit back and laugh after results like yesterday. So long may it last that we float under that radar and creep up on the rest. And look, with the defence we've got, lads, we aren't going to go far wrong, aren't we? Because if you don't concede goals, you can't lose games. And not just the best in the league at the moment, they're one of the best Tottenham have had, certainly in my lifetime. Rick's gone along with that in his lifetime. Fantastic stuff.
I think if you look at the stats as well, this current Spurs defence are up there with the best in European football at the moment. If you look at the stats, I think we're still in the top 5 of the defences in Europe. We've let in 3 goals, which is, I think there's only 2 teams that are above us with only letting in 2 so far. And I think we'd have to look at who they are. But we're doing pretty well as well in European football, not just in the Premier League.
Brilliant. And not one of those goals from open play. It just, it just beggars belief, doesn't it? In 7 games, we haven't conceded a goal from open play. I'm sure that's got to be some sort of record on its own. But look, let's just hope they continue. And I'm sure we're hearing all the right things from them. The passion's there. They're all signed up on contracts now, pretty much. It's looking good. It's looking good. I don't want to tempt fate, so I'm trying to be as reserved as I can this week, but it's looking very, very good. Okay, lads, let's move on to the questions for this week, which of course come from you guys out there on the Twitter sphere and on Facebook each and every week. You guys are great in getting your questions over to us. Just use the hashtag eSpursPod if you've got a question for us for the next podcast. This week we're going to kick off with a question from Ben Matthews. Let's go to Jay first up. This is for you, Jay. He asked, how did we manage to get Victor Wanyama from Southampton for 1.5 million less than they paid for him? Great question.
Well, I think the biggest part of that is that we've got Daniel Levy and Southampton haven't. So I think, a traditional one of Daniel's deals. No, I mean, in fairness, he had, let's be honest, we tried to get him last year and they wanted, 26 million quid for him, when he only had 2 years on his contract left. So his transfer value this year was lower than it would have been because he only had that 1 year to run. But, probably 26 was probably too much last year. What would you have paid for him? Would you have paid 18? Something like that for him was probably the right type of figure for how he is and the impact that he's had. But, his performance yesterday, he was certainly considerably more than an £11 million player, that's for sure.
Do you think Jay Dyer might now struggle to get back into the team?
Well, we've got so many games, as we said, coming up. And we've seen this week with the flexibilities right the way across the field. With two different fullbacks in a Champions League game. I think we were probably all a little bit surprised when the team come up from Moscow and we saw Trippier in front of Carl Walker. And I think that just shows you, Janssen played that day. There is so much flexibility in that team that I don't think anyone will struggle to get in the team. I think what will be a struggle is for people to perceive what is our strongest team.
Yeah.
Because there's just so many options that I think that every single week you'll see 3 or 4 changes and you have to try and keep everyone on board as well. It's no good having a top players that then don't play for 6 or 7 games because, they start to feel less than valued as squad members. And I think Pochettino is very clever with that. As we said with rotation, make sure you rotate with 2 or 3 changes and leave it at that each time. And so I don't think anyone's got a problem of getting back into the team. But I suppose if you had to say tomorrow's the, FA Cup final, Champions League final, what's our what would be our 11? That's a much harder question to answer than saying we've got Champions League Wednesday and we've got Arsenal Sunday and we've got Manchester United the week after.
They're certainly posing a few problems now, aren't they? The players in terms of who gets a go in the next game, in the biggest games. And I mean, it seems to have crept up on us a bit, doesn't it? Because I remember at the first podcast of the season, I was a bit of a sceptic, saying to the lads that our bench looked extremely weak in that first game. And now look here, there's quality on. You've got the likes of Eric Dyer on the bench. It's fantastic. When you've got that quality to bring on, it can only be healthy because the other players then, on their toes all of the time. Next question is from Chris Gregory. This is to Ricky. Chris asks, I don't believe we would have played as well as we did yesterday in the style we did with Kane up top. What do you think?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think John said earlier that, it may have suited him having that luxury of, choosing Son as opposed to Kane being injured. But I have to say, really, on this matter, I think Spurs are a better side with Kane. I can't get away from it. Look at the amount of goals Kane brings to the side. This isn't on another day. If we lost the game, everyone would be saying something different. So thankfully it worked. But there's no denying that Spurs with Harry Kane are a better side. There's more goals in the team. But I think what we have to now take into account is that we're just overall a better squad. Last season, a lot of teams were looking at Spurs saying that, without Kane, you're nothing. Well, we're proving as a squad we don't rely on, the likes of Harry Kane or Moussa Dembele. It's now very much we've got a great squad at Spurs, not a great 11, not a great 1. We've got a team, we've got a squad, we've got a great nucleus of players that really do work for each other. So in answer to the question, Harry Kane, for me, is a valuable player to this side. He shouldn't be underestimated as to whatsoever, but it just simply proves yesterday that we can get the results without having our top class players on show, and that's great to have that.
Let me put it to you like this, Rick. You're going to be a bit controversial here. Do you think we look a more mobile side with Son up front rather than Kane?
Listen, there's no doubt that Kane hasn't got blistering pace, But I think we'd be ill-afforded to think that, Kane doesn't make us a better side. I think, like we discussed at the start before we came on air, Andy, that the fact City played into our hands as such because you have two teams that want to win. And like we discussed earlier, when you play the likes of Crystal Palace at home, Sunderland, they're coming for a point. So you're having to inevitably try and break down 11 men. And when people say Kane isn't mobile enough to break them down, well, we don't play that expansive style of football at home with two expansive wingers to be able to, gung-ho teams. It's just not the way we play. For me personally, I will always say I think we're a better side with Kane. People can have their reservations. That's not to take away anything from Son, who's been phenomenal, the last 2 or 3 games. He's fully merited his place in the side, irregardless whether Kane was or wasn't fit. But I've got to stick by my guns and say I think Kane's record speaks for itself, and we'd be silly enough to think that this Tottenham side would be better without Harry Kane, because in my opinion it wouldn't be.
Just on that, I mean, with Kane, we played Chelsea last year away and Kane scored. He scored in both games against Arsenal last year. He scored at Anfield last year. He scored in both games against Manchester City last year.
Yeah.
So, okay, you might play slightly differently, but you can't deny the fact that Kane is a massive part of that side. And all of our big results over the past couple of years under Pochettino, they've all featured Kane, and almost every single one of them Kane has scored in.
Yeah.
And, Son showed lots of pace and energy in that yesterday. I'm not so sure he showed more energy than Harry Kane, because we know Harry Kane will have chased and chased and chased as well. And actually yesterday Son didn't score. So I'm not so sure it made as big a difference, certainly, than I just think Kane's massively important to Tottenham, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a great point. He's certainly there when it matters. You look back at the big games, the Arsenal games, he's always on the score sheet, isn't he? And those sorts of games. And, again, another example of that strength in depth. Brilliant stuff. OK, let's get another question. This question is from @GoDarkHorse, and this is for you, John, because I know you're a massive fan, and it's on Pochettino. He asked, do we just have to accept the fact that it takes a season or two to fully adapt to Poch's system in order to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously going to take time when any new manager comes in, and the fact that he'd taken over from Dim Sherwood, who didn't really have much of a clue what was going on, I think that would have been a big adaptation for the players that were there when Pochettino turned up. But I think that this is why I don't get annoyed that we don't sign a marquee signing, for example. I know we spent big money on Sissoko, so that disproves what I'm about to say a little bit. But it's more about the type of player that we're bringing in instead of the name. They've got to be able to play the system. They've got to be able to be fit enough to play it and be adaptable enough and not have too much of an ego, possibly. And that's why we're seeing players like, Ali for next to nothing, Dyer cost next to nothing, Wanyama, who's played under him before. These are the kind of people that... See, when Poch came in, I really hoped that he'd sign Dejan Lovren and bring him with him. But as it was, I'm glad... Well, I'll say glad we had to endure Fazio for a season, didn't we? But we waited and brought Toby in instead. And I think that it's always a bonus when you're bringing in players that the manager's already worked with. But he's not done that as much as, say, Harry Redknapp did in the past, obviously. But yeah, I think you're talking about upping every single player's fitness levels from what they were before. Playing players in positions where they actually are good, where it's not a question of square pegs and round holes, which is a big part of it. I remember Sherwood playing Chadley and Sigurdsson in central midfield away at West Ham, and when you're doing things like that, you're asking for trouble, And you saw Danny Rose come out and said this week that he'd never had a manager actually, try and improve him as a left back. Instead, it was a case of, get on a training pitch, do your thing, and maybe you'll play, maybe you won't. But he's obviously a very personable man. He seems to be like it's a bit cliched, but like a father figure to some of these players. And the fact that he actually cares about he clearly cares about these players. He is a bit vanilla for my liking, to be honest, in terms of the way he talks to the press. He's always very, very pleased, and everything's fantastic every week. He's a bit like Redknapp, like everything was terrific, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, there was going to be times where a player comes in and has to have an adaptation period depending on who he's worked under before. But I think the fact that he has a lot of his signings have hit the ground running, which means he's obviously got this perfect profile of a player that he wants to bring in, who he knows that will happen with, And let's hope that going forward, Paul Mitchell's not the key component in this that we all thought he is. And when he's not there anymore, these kind of players will continue to turn up and hit the ground running. I don't know what Poch would be able to do with Neil Ruddock and Gary Mabbutt, but what he can do with Jan Vertonghen and Toby Alderweireld has been quite amazing so far. So long may it continue.
Well, listen, we've got Chiking down the road, so I'm sure Neil Ruddock would be just fine. Brilliant stuff, and he deserves every bit of praise that guy can get. Absolutely brilliant. Last question of the night, lads, goes to Ian, and this Ian is from Shoobs at Spurs BJJ. And he asked, is this the best Spurs performance you have seen against worthy opposition? The Inter 3-1 in the Champions League, Gaza's semi-final against the Woolwich, various other wins. How does yesterday rank amongst those, do you think?
Oh, I would have said it was up there. I think that the 3-1 home game against Inter will always, stand out in my mind as a fantastic performance. As with the Arsenal, was it the Arsenal one that you mentioned, the Gaza?
Yeah, the semi-final, 91.
Yeah, from a league perspective, I think we've said it a few times on the pod tonight. Yesterday's performance was near perfect, and I would say it would be in that top three for sure.
Certainly was. Fantastic to see. And brilliant stuff, guys, as always. Thanks for getting your questions into us. I hope that's answered a few of your questions and thoughts out there. And don't forget to get in touch with us for next week's podcast. Hashtag e-Spurs pod if you've got a question for the lads, and they'll do their very best to answer them, as you've heard tonight. What I want to do just very quickly is go across the board and get the lads' thoughts on something. Obviously, now with this strength in depth we're talking about, we've got another added problem in there. We've got Dembele, Dyer and Wanyama all fighting over arguably one defensive midfield slot, you would think, maybe two in there. If that's to be the case, which two do you go for at the moment based on the season so far? So bearing in mind, obviously, Dyer's only just dropped out. He's had a good start up till now. So you've got Dembele, Dyer and Wanyama. For the next game against West Brom, who do you go for? So let's get the lads' thoughts across the board on that one before we move on. Rick, your thoughts?
Oh, such a horrible question. But it just shows really how much we've grown as a team now that we've got this luxury. I think if you're looking at the season as a whole, I think you'd have to go with Dembele and Wanyama. But I don't want us to ever underestimate the importance of Dyer as well. I mean, like I say, last season his leadership on the field, off the field was fantastic, and we're in a position where we are fighting on all four fronts. So with that being the case, Dyer will most certainly have game time this year. There's no doubt about that. But I think if we're looking solely just on the game itself to win the game, I think you can't look past Wanyama and Dembele.
So Wanyama and Dembele for Rick. Jace?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me that.
No
For West
pressure.
Brom, it might just be down to where does Wanyama play this week if he's away with Kenya and he's got to fly 6,000 miles and Eric Dyer's had a week off,
Yep.
or a simple comeback game against Malta. I'll say I'll go for Dyer and Dembele purely on the thing that probably Wanyama could do with a break, having played every single game. But it's, I don't think any decision you could make, you'd be making it on almost on merit, because, I think it's just the freshness in the legs more than anything else.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about it, isn't it? They're all top quality in there, defensive midfielders. When you think back to maybe a season or two ago when we was, we're struggling a little bit for that type of player in there. Now to have three in the same position, that's really, the basis of this question for the lads, and enjoying making them work for their money on this bit, enjoying making them sweat. John, your thoughts? Dembele, Dyer, Wanyama?
I think a lot depends on the international break and what happens. I don't know if any of you can confirm this, but I believe Wanyama's been given grace to miss Kenya's friendly. Is that right?
That's right. He won't be playing. Yep.
Right, okay, so Wanyama's a shoo-in then for me. I know Dembele's been picked in the Belgium squad, even though he's not obviously not been fit enough to even be on the bench for us yesterday. So a lot of it depends on, who comes back in better shape. So I would imagine it'd be Dyer and Wanyama who would start at West Brom, because Dyer, obviously he's fit. He came on yesterday, didn't he? So you'd expect him to get some minutes under his belt for England. So a lot of it depends on whether Dembele actually plays any minutes for Belgium. If he doesn't, I would imagine that rules him out. So for me, it'd be Dyer and Wanyama at this moment.
So Dyer and Wanyama for John. So we're getting quite a few different pairings formed already. So it'd be interesting to see what Poch goes for. And Ian?
I would go for Wanyama and Dembele if they were fit. Only reason I'm saying that is that you always seem to have a battle on your hands in the midfield at West Brom. It's always quite a combative game, so I think you would need those two just to shore it up at the start, and then maybe you could look at making a change. If you're 1 or 2 up in the second half and you've got to 60 or 70 minutes, and I would, that would be my two.
Brilliant stuff. Listen, I'm putting Dembele in there as a defensive midfielder. Of course, he's more of a playmaker than a defensive midfielder, isn't he? Likes to get forward as well. Likes to attack, and a brilliant pass on him. So it's just fantastic. I wonder which way Poch will go with this one. In terms of the midfield. e-Spurs pod, #e-Spurs pod for next week. Just before we move on, a comment that's come into us via I know Alan Gilzine. He says, "Hi guys, my favourite Spurs podcast. Spurs since 1972. Been living in Italy for a decade." He then goes on to make a point or more of a question, where he thinks maybe Spurs should, instead of trying to play the ball out of defence sometimes, which can sometimes cause problems or pressure, should we lump it upfield on occasions? Just very quickly on that one, Rick.
If I remember rightly, I think last season Alderweireld's ball over the top against Everton away at Goodison and Dele Alli's finish. I think Alderweireld's got that ability to play those long raking balls over the top, for Ali to get onto, or a striker. So I think Spurs have proven down the years, or certainly under Poch's reign, that they're happy to mix it up. But I think we can't get away from the fact that he very much is intent on Spurs playing the ball out from the back. That is the modern game at the moment. He likes that kind of play, and I think that is technically Spurs. We've learned to play that way now. And yes, there are going to be times where, as a Tottenham fan, your heart's going to be in your mouth, because we haven't normally been able to trust the defence until now. That's the difference.
Certainly is. Brilliant stuff. And listen, mate, we really appreciate your comment, and thanks for listening to the podcast, and keep listening and keep your comments coming into us. Brilliant stuff. Hope that's answered your question. So get your comments into us, #eSpursPod for next week. Let's move on to the preview for the batch of games coming up. As I say, an interesting spell for Spurs, because this sees us now with 4 away games on the trot, 2 in the Cup and 2 in the league. So we're really going to find out about the character of this side, I think, aren't we? Obviously, a home game against Man City, you've got the backing of the capacity crowd behind you. You're playing a big opponent. Our next game's West Brom away, by Leverkusen in the Champions League away, Bournemouth away, and Liverpool away in the Cup. So a real mixed bag of competitions and levels of opponents in there. Jay, what do you expect from this, and what we can take out of this 4 games, and where we'll end up after this run?
I think we'll go to West Brom and win. I think there'll be a little bit of a feeling in the side to try and put that result towards the end of last season, because as much as people think we lost the league at Chelsea, I think most of us probably realised, and I think the players almost themselves, I remember the scenes after that West Brom game, that they looked really down, and I think most of them felt that we lost it the night at the chance of winning it slipped away after the West Brom game.
Yeah.
So I think we'll go to West Brom and get a result and pick up the win there. Liverpool away, I think that might be a little bit tougher, because I just think they might go all out for that, and we might pick 1 or 2 young players. Just like we said, I think we'll pick a better side than we had for Gillingham, but it still wouldn't surprise me if, say, Carroll, Winks, Carter Vickers, or that play at that game at Anfield, and with them not having any European football and a night at Anfield, I think we'll face a full-on Liverpool side that night. So I think that one might be just a bit too much for us. Leverkusen away, I know Ian's going there, so good luck, Ian, and we're looking forward to the old Judith Chalmers reports. I can see Leverkusen almost being a draw, but it's you're starting to try and predict results 3 weeks in advance type of thing, which isn't easy. Bournemouth, we just crushed Bournemouth twice last year, didn't we? And they'll have hopefully Wilshere will play, and it'll be the time to crush him as well. But I'll say we'll take 6 points from the league games, and we won't win either of the other 2.
Okay, so interesting prediction there from Jay. John, of these games, what do you hope for at the end of this batch?
Well, I think, like Jay said, definitely we're going to be looking for 6 points in the league, and I think we will get them 6.
You know, we do owe West Brom one, and I know we demolished Bournemouth there last season 5-1, didn't we? So a repeat of that would go down nicely. And now they've obviously weakened their team by signing Jack Wilshere. You know, I think we'll be all right. I think the thing with Leverkusen, they're a bit Jekyll and Hyde at the minute. I think they're mid-table in the league, but they beat Dortmund at the weekend.
Yeah.
And they played really, really well. They won 2-0. And they've done them on the counter. And I think I know we don't play that way and it'll be pressure from high and stuff, but that's going to be I think that will be the toughest of the four. Obviously, being in the Champions League, naturally you'd expect that to be the toughest. And with Liverpool, I think, again, before we see the team sheets, it's almost impossible to call that one.
Mm.
I don't think there's any guarantee that Liverpool will go full strength. You know, I think Klopp understands the fact that, yeah, they're out of Europe, but they need to be in the top four. They need to finish there. So maybe you'll see the extra games like the League Cup as a bit of a distraction, although they got to the final of it last year. I think that, like Jay said, again, it won't be like a Gillingham sort of team. I don't think we'll see a midfield pivot of Winks and Carroll again. But I still imagine Carter Vickers would play, and hopefully Nkulu gets a start. So I'd say 6 points in the league, a draw at Leverkusen, and Liverpool at this stage, mate, I can't really give you a prediction, I'm afraid. I'd like to think we'd win and we'd be a step closer to Wembley, but you never know with the 11s that we might see on the night. Who knows?
Rick, the Liverpool game, does it really matter in the context of the season?
Oh, well, the thing for me is it's a winnable cup, but at the same time, my only concern with that cup is that it's a mid-season, cup final.
Yeah.
And you just wonder, with the league maybe changing my tune slightly, on the back of, the result of the weekend, we've really put a statement out there and, we'll be up there for the reckoning. And what you don't want to do is, as great as it is to win a cup, and I go with Jason's, thoughts that, Spurs, we need to start winning trophies. But at the same time, if there's an opportunity to really kind of go for this league, then we have to take it. But at the same time, I don't want that to be a detriment of any competition. So my only concern and reservation with that cup is because it is a mid-season cup, is that going to affect our performance, elsewhere? Champions League, FA Cup, Premier League. I certainly don't want to see Spurs lose any game, but I do think that Liverpool game may just be... I don't know if Poch will go for a full-strength team there. If I'm being completely honest, when you look back at his previous Cup team selections, he hasn't always gone with the strongest team. So it does lead me to wonder whether he will just kind of, I wouldn't say mix it up in terms of the kids, but I don't think necessarily it will be the strongest Spurs side. But I suppose all you can ask is that we give a good account of ourselves. And, this league, I think really, on the back of Sunday's result, you've got to say it's probably going to take priority again.
Yeah, and I mean, although I asked the question, the Liverpool game, does it matter? I think anyone who listens to the podcast on a regular basis will know my thoughts about the cup competitions, love them to bits, and I'd love to see nothing more than to see Spurs beat Liverpool, get to another cup final, which of course will be at home, as we're now at Wembley. So Ian's going up to that one, so it'd be a great trip up there to Anfield. That nighttime atmosphere under the lights, fantastic. Ian, you're going up, as I say, to Liverpool. The 3 games before that, Bournemouth, Bayer, Leverkusen. I'll tell you what, let's focus on Bayer Leverkusen in the Champions League. In your opinion, do we need to get at least a point from that?
I think we need to get a point. I think we need to keep getting the points on the board because, the results so far have thrown up that this is going to be a really tight group. And I think that the more points you get, the more chance you'll have of getting out. And I know that's an old cliche and that's a no smelly brown stuff Sherlock moment. However, you need to take the points that you can. And I was really, really impressed with the way that we played against CSK Moscow.
Yeah.
That was, for me, quite rightly, we focused on the Man City game tonight. But, for me, that was a real mature performance. And I think that, if we can go to the Bay Arena and play with the same maturity and silence the crowd as effectively as we did against Moscow, then I'm hopeful that, that we might even come back with all 3.
Brilliant stuff, lads, as always. Before we head off tonight, John, I know there's something you'd like to mention.
Yeah, thank you, mate. I just wanted to give a shout out to a good friend of mine, John Cooper. He's on Twitter at DukeCooper85. He's had quite a weekend. Him and his lovely wife, Maria, had beautiful twin girls on Friday, Ava Rose and Grace Sophia. And I know it's not been the most easiest of starts to their little lives. I was updating John from the hospital yesterday. So I just want to give you a shout out, mate. Much love from all of us, and I'm looking forward to meeting the girls.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And on behalf of everybody at e-Spurs, we wish everybody there well. And, you know, our thoughts go out to them, and we wish everybody well. Brilliant stuff. Well said, mate. And that is another e-Spurs podcast. We hope you've enjoyed what you heard tonight. Don't forget to get in touch with us every week via Twitter and Facebook at @e_Spurs on the Twitter. Hashtag eSpursPod if you want to leave a message for us. And on Facebook, we're eSpurs page. Give our page a like on there if you enjoy what you hear. Rick, back in your cupboard, mate.
Not waste any time. Back in there straight away.
Back in there, mate, until the next good win. It's been brilliant. I enjoy talking Spurs every week with these lads. I hope you guys enjoy what you hear. Get in touch with us and listen out for the next e-Spurs podcast. And on behalf of Jason, John, Ricky, Ian and myself, have a great week, guys. And as always, come on, you Spurs.
No one can stop